Well, I read an article in the British Butterfly Conservation News about 3 years ago by a woman called Lynn Harrison, who wrote about Welsh names for butterflies, and I thought that was rather interesting. So I wondered then if there were Cornish names for butterflies and moths.
And are there any old traditional Cornish language names for moths?
Well, I could find no Cornish names at all, and so I thought it'd be an idea to start some. And I took part in a Dallas camp 2 years ago when we ran a moth flight actually, and we got some moths coming in, and we made up names for the moths.
Yes, of course there are some insect names in Cornish, such as Buhik which means ladybird, Kellyonen, fly, wheel, beetle, and even the verb gwibesa, which means to catch gnats. Why anyone would want to go around catching gnats, I'm not sure. What sort of names did you come up with?
Well, one of the moths we got was Tigger ruby, which is a small reddish-brown moth, very attractive actually, and in English, ruby tiger. Another of the moths we got was Sugana, which is a brown moth that in June and July batters against your windows trying to get in, big hairy moth called the drinker. It's called the drinker because the caterpillar actually drinks the dew on grass at night. We had about 28 species altogether, so 28 names that we wrote up and published in the Entomologist's Record and Journal of Variation.
And how did you decide what the names would be?
Well, most of the names were in fact direct translations of the English names. There was one moth we had without an English name, but I looked back into some old books and found that it had been called in 1843 the dusky yellow veneer, so we translated that. Another moth we actually used the Latin name Ecliptoptera silenciata, and we came up with the Cornish Celch Callan, which means the vein of iron ochre in the shape of a circle. The moth itself is called a phoenix.
Well, let's have some other of the moths. What about Tronic? What does that look like?
Well, that's a moth with very long palps sticking out the front, which means it looks a bit like a snout, and that's the name of the moth.
And of course, Tronic in Cornish means nosy or long-nosed. Spectaculis, that sounds fairly obvious.
Yes, that's a fairly small dark moth, but if you look at it head on, you see two little circles just at the top of the head, which look very much like spectacles, hence the name, the spectacle.
One of my favourite moths is Anlorskven. What does that look like?
Oh, that's a very brightly coloured moth, yellow with brown patches on it, very, very common, called the brimstone.
Treehorn ower, that again sounds obvious. That means golden triangle in Cornish. Has it got a golden triangle?
Yes, it's a little purple moth actually with little patches of gold on it. Very, very attractive.
Now obviously you've only done 28 moths so far. Have you any plans to do any further translation of moth names into Cornish?
Well, there's something like 1,500 different moths in Cornwall and about 2,400 in Britain, so I haven't really got time to do any more.